January 1969, Twickenham Film Studios, London. A camera was rolling. The Beatles had decided to film themselves recording their new album, to document the creative process, to show the world how the greatest band in history made music. What the camera actually captured was something nobody had planned for. Four men who had changed the world together, slowly realizing they no longer wanted to be in the same room. George Harrison standing up mid-rehearsal, walking out. "I'll see you round the clubs," he told them. John Lennon watching him go. "If he doesn't come back by Tuesday," Lennon said, "we get Clapton." Paul McCartney sitting at his piano, trying to hold something together that had already decided to fall apart. Ringo Starr, the quiet one, the one everyone forgot to mention, watching all of it. Saying nothing. The camera kept rolling. This is the story of Let It Be, the album the Beatles made while they were dying, the film that caught every moment of their destruction, and the song that gave it all a title, written by a man saying goodbye to everything he had built. Let It Be.
Mother Mary, come to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be.
To understand what happened in January 1969, you have to understand what the previous 7 years had cost. The Beatles had not toured since 1966. They had stopped because touring had become impossible, the crowds too large, the noise too loud, the security too thin between them, and the chaos their existence created. They retreated into the studio. Sgt. Pepper, the White Album.
Revolution, well, we'd all love to change the world.
Albums that expanded what popular music could be. Albums made by four men who were becoming, simultaneously, more individually ambitious and less capable of functioning as a democratic unit. The White Album, recorded in 1968, had been less a band album than four solo projects sharing the same release date. George Harrison had submitted songs that Lennon and McCartney had treated as afterthoughts. Ringo Starr had quit during the sessions, briefly, without announcement, and then come back to find his drum kit decorated with flowers by the other three. John Lennon had brought Yoko Ono into the studio, something that had never happened before. Something that felt to the other three like a violation of a space that had always been theirs alone. And Paul McCartney, who had held the band together through sheer force of creative will after Brian Epstein's death in 1967, was holding something that was increasingly unwilling to be held. They decided to make a new album, something simple, something live, a return to what they had been before all of it. They called the project Get Back. They set up cameras, and they began. Twickenham Film Studios, January 2nd, 1969. From the first day it was wrong. The idea had been to rehearse new songs and then perform them live in front of an audience. Where exactly, nobody could agree. An amphitheater in Libya was suggested, a television broadcast, the Roundhouse in London. They couldn't agree on the venue. They couldn't agree on the format. They couldn't agree on much of anything. John Lennon arrived late, or not at all. When he was present, Yoko was beside him, sitting on his amplifier, occasionally making sounds into his microphone. Harrison felt invisible. He had written something, one of the greatest love songs in the English language, and McCartney had dismissed it early in the sessions. He had watched his compositions treated as filler while Lennon and McCartney's dominated every album they had ever made. On January 10th, 9 days into the sessions, Harrison and Lennon had a confrontation. "I'll play whatever you want me to play," Harrison told him. "Or I won't play at all if you don't want me to play. Whatever it is that will please you, I'll do it." The words were polite, the tone was not. Harrison left. He went home. He didn't come back for several days. When he returned, he had conditions. The live concert idea was abandoned. The sessions would move to the basement of Apple Corps headquarters on Savile Row. A new keyboard player would be brought in, Billy Preston, an American musician who had known the band since their Hamburg days. Preston's presence changed the atmosphere. Not permanently, not enough, but enough for the sessions to continue, and enough for Paul McCartney to sit alone at a piano one evening and play something he had been hearing in his head, a chord. then another, a melody that felt to him like something his mother would have said. His mother had died of cancer when he was 14. Her name was Mary. "When I find myself in times of trouble," he sang, "Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be." January 30th, 1969. The question of where to perform the new songs had never been resolved, so they went to the rooftop of the Apple Corps building on Savile Row, in the middle of London, in January, in the cold. They set up equipment, they played. "Don't let me down, get back, I've got a feeling."
I've got a feeling I can't hide, oh no.
Two Lennon and McCartney songs played to a London sky while pedestrians stopped on the street below and looked up. The police eventually came. Asked them to stop, they played one more song. It was the last time the Beatles performed live. After 42 minutes on a rooftop in January, the greatest live act in rock history played their final show. Not to an arena, not to a screaming crowd. To London traffic, to confused office workers, to a police officer who asked them politely to turn it down. Lennon leaned into his microphone. "I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the group and ourselves," he said, "and I hope we pass the audition." The Get Back sessions produced hours of recorded material and no finished album. The tapes sat. In the months that followed, the Beatles made Abbey Road. One final extraordinary record that sounded nothing like a band falling apart. But underneath the music, the machinery of dissolution was running. Brian Epstein, their manager, their protector, the man who had believed in them when nobody else did, had died in 1967. Without him, they had been managing themselves through Apple Corps, an experiment in creative capitalism that was hemorrhaging money at a catastrophic rate. They needed professional management. Paul McCartney wanted his father-in-law Lee Eastman. John Lennon wanted Alan Klein, an aggressive New York businessman who had managed the Rolling Stones. Lennon signed with Klein first, without consulting the others. George Harrison and Ringo Starr, wanting to keep the peace, signed with Klein too. McCartney refused. 3 against 1. The band that had made every decision by consensus, that had functioned as a democracy since 4 teenagers in Liverpool had decided to form a group, had just split irreparably over a management contract. Lennon later said he told the other 3 at a meeting in September 1969 that he was leaving. Klein persuaded him to keep it quiet. So John Lennon knew he had left the Beatles while Paul McCartney and George Harrison and Ringo Starr went on making decisions about a band that had already ended. On April 10, 1970, McCartney publicly announced he was leaving. He was blamed for breaking up the Beatles. It had been Lennon's decision. Made in September, kept secret until April. The camera had captured everything, except that. The tapes from the Get Back sessions sat for over a year. Phil Spector, brought in by Klein over McCartney's objections, remixed them into the Let It Be album. He added orchestration to McCartney's songs without his permission. He buried some recordings, altered others. McCartney was furious. He sued. Not just over the album, over everything. The management, the money, the decisions made without him. The legal proceedings lasted years. 4 men who had made something genuinely extraordinary together, spending the early 1970s in courtrooms arguing about who owned what. 1970. It showed the world what the sessions had looked like. Harrison walking out, McCartney trying to hold it together, Lennon and Yoko, the rooftop, the police. John Lennon described the Let It Be sessions as the most miserable sessions on Earth. He called them hell. The album that had been designed to show the world how the greatest band in history made music showed them something else entirely. How a band that had changed everything ran out of reasons to stay in the same room. Let It Be didn't kill the Beatles. The Beatles killed the Beatles. Not because they stopped loving the music, not because the talent disappeared, not because the audience went anywhere, but because 4 people who had grown up together in public, who had become the most famous human beings on Earth together, had grown into individuals who no longer fit inside the same band. Lennon needed something the band couldn't give him. Harrison needed recognition the others weren't willing to extend. McCartney needed control that the others weren't willing to surrender. Ringo Starr, perhaps the wisest of them, could see what was happening and couldn't stop it. The song Let It Be is Paul McCartney hearing his mother's voice in a dream, telling him to accept what he cannot change. He wrote it while the band was falling apart, released it while they were already gone. It is one of the most beautiful songs ever recorded, made in the middle of one of the most painful endings in music history. That contradiction is the Beatles in miniature. The music was always bigger than what was happening around it, even when what was happening around it was the end. The Rooftop concert film still exists. You can watch it today. Four men in January 1969, playing together for the last time, not knowing it was the last time. Or maybe knowing, and playing anyway. Let It Be. What's your memory of the Beatles? Drop it in the comments below, and if you want more stories about the moments that changed music forever, subscribe to What Killed the Band. We'll see you in the next one.